Neat fight we have coming up this weekend at lightweight. We have the UFC debut of Top Gun Tucker Lutz, and he's going to be taking on, I'm assuming the guy like Slayer, Angela Jack! Kevin Aguilar, Matt. For Jackson Wink's Kevin Aguilar, former LFA champ at 145 pounds. He came in on the Contender Series. He came into the UFC, and he looked pretty good before losing his last 3 fights. And the thing for Kevin Aguilar is you look at the names. Dan Ige. Well, that's probably going to happen. Zubair Tukhugov. Well, that might happen. So then he moves up from 45 to 55, loses split decision to Charles Rosa, and now we're here. So we got a guy that used to be a featherweight fighting at lightweight. Height-wise, reach-wise, both guys about the same. Now we got to focus in on Tucker Lutz. And really when we do, Matt, it's an interesting one because this is a guy that doesn't train at the biggest gym. He's a guy out of Maryland. It's Owings Mills, Maryland is where he's from, fighting out of ground control. And I went back, I watched some of the tape. If he really wants to win, he's got to mix it up. Maybe strike a little bit early, but into the clinch, get your takedowns, ride it out on top. And there's a great method of victory for Tucker Lutz, a guy who, in the pre-show for Contender Series, just wanted to work with his hands. Dad owned a sod business, loading sod onto pallets, taking him out to job sites. Just the way to be, really, Matt. But I look at the way that Tucker Lutz fights. It's kind of interesting. He kind of stands a little bit square in front of you. He throws a lot of power into his shots. And really, he did it on the regional scene. He did it a bit on Contender Series. Will he do it in the UFC where there'll be some jitters? I don't know. But it's an interesting stylistic matchup for Lutz to be taking on Aguilar. And for Aguilar, he's taken on some really good competition. When you look at Lutz and his way up to the UFC, he lost his debut. He's on an 11-fight win streak. But the combined opponents record all throughout his pro career, 59 and 52. It's a little salty.
Yeah, you don't love to see that. Now, I have to be completely honest. I don't think I've been more wrong about a fighter in Kevin Aguilar since I have about Jonathan Martinez. Like, those are the 2 fighters I might have the worst reads on, because after Aguilar beat Enrique Barzola, and just for complete transparency, we talk about Brandon Marcos a lot, how it's like, hey, we really like it when this fighter beat Brandon Marcos on her way up. Enrique Barzola is just one of those names, It's like, yeah, he might never become champ, he might never even have a ranking next to his name, but if you beat Enrique Barzola, it means, well, you must have decent takedown defense, you must have alright striking, because he throws a lot of volume, and you must have pretty good cardio, too. I had really high hopes for Aguilar, especially coming out of that fight, because he was just kind of able to out Enrique Barzola. Barzola did well, but then you look after that fight, he loses to Dan Ige. No shame, because Dan Ige's fighting the Korean Zombie in what could be one of the greatest fights of the year. My issue with Kevin Aguilar is, if he just had a little bit more power, I actually think he'd be not a dominant force in this division, because especially him fighting up at lightweight, but I think he'd be a really hard fighter to deal with, because with Aguilar, I actually like his cardio, I like his forward pressure, I like a few things about Aguilar. My issue is that he just doesn't have enough pop in his hands to really get the respect of his opponents. Even look back at that Dan Ige fight, him and Dan Ige were landing kind of shot for shot, at least in the beginning of that fight, but you could tell that as Dan Ige was starting to land with more volume, it was taking a toll on Kevin Aguilar that the shots of Aguilar just weren't able to do on Dan Ige. Even look back at the Charles Rosa fight, and listen, I might be one of the bigger critics on Charles Rosa, if you will, but I thought Charles Rosa won that fight. Like, he looked pretty good, and the problem with Aguilar, I thought Aguilar would at least be competitive in some of those grappling exchanges with Rosa, but Rosa really had his way with him on the mat, and that's what was so disappointing. I can talk about the things that I wish Kevin Aguilar had, but I thought he was a decent wrestler, and I thought he was good on the mat, but after that Charles Rosa fight, I just don't really know what I'm getting with Kevin Aguilar at this point.
Well, the weird thing about Aguilar, and listen, we take the metrics into account every now and again. You look at the UFC stats, if you have a good body of work and you can really kind of take out a few oddities along the way. Priscila Cachoeira as a fighter on this card where you can go, okay, the Valentina Shevchenko fight was a wild beatdown, but apart from that, she's fought the level of competition she should. For Kevin Aguilar, it's been a decent level of competition. Even Dan Ige, at the time, it made sense at 45 to make that fight. So then I look at Kevin Aguilar and fight metric. 91% of the time he's striking. 9% of the time he's going for takedowns. He hasn't really done anything in terms of submissions in the UFC, so it's just odd. It's not the guy that you think of, really. Then you look at his overall numbers. Okay, so you're a striker. 3.69 strikes given per minute to 4.47 taken. So he's getting outstruck, but he's striking 91% of the time. What are we doing here? Then you look at the takedowns. 37% accuracy to 53% defense. Well, that's not good. Like, it's just really hard to get a read on Aguilar.
There's a version out there of Kevin Aguilar that I'm sure I really like, but the fact that, again, he doesn't do the things that we assume he would be going for more. If he was a much more takedown heavy fighter, if he had a little bit more pop in his shots, like, if he just did any one area a little bit better, then I think we would be dealing with a fighter, maybe not a top 15 guy, but just one of those guys. I'll throw a name like Randy Brown out there. Like, not everyone can have a ranking next to their name. Sometimes you just have to be a monster outside the rankings, and I do think Kevin Aguilar could have some of those interesting competitive wins afterwards. It will be interesting to see how he fights at 155, just because, again, up a weight class, it should be interesting. I don't think he'll have any cardio issues. I doubt the weight cut should be an issue for him, but it is always interesting to see, especially when a guy moves up in weight and it's only 10 pounds. Normally we see it from like middleweight to light heavyweight, and that can make a massive issue, but still, from featherweight to lightweight, like Max Holloway did it, and he showed that, yeah, you kind of have to adjust your body to the weight class. So it will be really interesting for Kevin Aguilar moving forward in this fight. But for Tucker Lutz, like, this is a really great fight to have for your UFC debut. You're fighting Kevin Aguilar, who, yes, he is on a losing streak, but hear me out. He's lost to, like we said, we made sure that we mentioned the names that Aguilar's lost to. If you're able to beat a guy like Kevin Aguilar, then you're all of a sudden lumped in with those names, like a Charles Rosa, who, yeah, Charles Rosa is not, like, the biggest deal in the world, but if John Anik really likes you, then you're doing something right.
That's a Boston connection.
I know that's a Boston connection, but still, it would do great things for Lutz's career, especially with your UFC debut being against a guy like Aguilar, who, yes, he might not have this big shine next to his name, he might be on a 3-fight losing streak, but again, beating a guy like Aguilar is going to prove us a lot, at least going forward in Tucker's career.
So if we look at, Matt's just going to have to refer to him from Tucker from now on. It's Tucker Lutz. But if we look at Tucker Lutz and his overall body of work, again, you come into the UFC, so let's go 2018 up. 2018, 3 fights, 3 wins, all finishes. 12-5 was the record of Francisco Isada. And then if you go and look at it, it's the saltiest 12-5. Then he beats Timothy Wade, who was 3-14. Then he beats Wesley Golden, 8-11. But again, we talk about it. They're finishes. They're quick finishes. You like to see it. Then he fights Cole Presley, 6-3. Then he beats Trevor Thompson, 2-2. And then he fights Chase Gibson. Gibson was coming up from 45 to 55 to take the fight. Gibson looked great in the first round. He was doing a good job of striking. And you could hear the commentary team say, hey, from what we've seen in Tucker Lutz and from what I've seen in him from his fights on the amateur or the regional circuit, he gets hit. He can, if he gets kicked, he brings his hands down. If he gets punched, he brings his hands up. And then they kind of stay up. They don't really stay anywhere in between. His striking defense can be a little bit shifty, but he's finishing guys, not Chase Gibson. And in that fight, he was a huge favorite. He was a minus 470 favorite. He won it by decision. They didn't give him a contract in that episode. He had to come back and fight again. He fought Sherrard Blackage. He gets a win over there. He was a plus 155 underdog. He wins by decision. It's like, oh, okay. Well, here's your contract. You fought twice. That was the season finale of the show. But I haven't seen it from Lutz. Lutz has to prove it to me, and this is the prove me fight.
No, that's a really good point. I kind of have to take Aguilar until I see something different from Tucker in this fight. If he is able to go out there, let's say he gets a first round finish, then great. From here on out, I'll have a much better idea. But I still do think that I'm going to have to stick with Aguilar in this fight. It's not that I love anything from him. It's just I have much more of a base of knowledge to go off of. And again, if he can string together, I don't love his volume, but he can get some decent volume together on the feet. And if he is able to somewhat overwhelm Lutz with that, then he might have some success. But this is one of those really do or die fights for Aguilar.
I mean, you look at the odds, they kind of flip-flop. Both guys open at par, minus 110 for Aguilar. He's now minus 102 underdog. And if you look at Lutz, minus 122. Over on Topology, everybody's got Lutz. 940 total votes, 73% with Lutz, 6% by decision. For the 27% that have Aguilar, 76% by decision as well. To me, it's a y'all must have forgot fight. We'll see what happens. We could be totally wrong, Matt. I really want to know what people are thinking down in the comment section on this one.
I don't think this will be a finish. That, again, I do kind of side with the Topology voters, Matt. But yeah, I do like Aguilar. Again, if you're on a 3-fight losing streak, you kind of are fighting for your job in that 4th fight. So I think he realizes, like, if I lose this one, this is it. So yeah, ever so slightly picking Aguilar.
The earlier Contender Series fighter beating the guy that needed 2 fights on the Contender Series, we're both going with Kevin Aguilar, the former LFA champ, get the win. Matt, big fights at lightweight on this entire card, but our main event, holy smokes, for the vacant belt, you have Charles Oliveira taking on Michael Chandler. You're not going to want to miss it, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.